Brian Tanguay. I'm the president at the Narragansett Historical Society. You may have seen me on Templeton TV before. Today we're in the school looking at the murals and to talk about them and to at least introduce the students to what they're looking at, and hopefully they're looking at them. So behind me is the Templeton Inn. This was built in 1900 by Moses Richardson, and he put 40 rooms in this building, and eventually it grew to another 60 that worked its way down South Road. And it was sitting right where the fire department is now, and that's across the street from the school where I'm standing. And it worked its way all the way down South Road, so you would have been able to see it right out this front door back in 1900. So recently we discovered that this gentleman driving this car is Albert Phelps, and Albert was a photographer, an amateur photographer, and of course back then they were all just getting their cameras for the first time. So he went around town and took an awful lot of pictures that we have and have been recently identifying where they are and who they are. He actually owned the house. He was the last private resident at the Narragansett Historical Society building on 1 Boynton Road. So in this image here, which spans 2 stories high, it's in the stairwell, which was very interesting the way they did it. But this one has a superimposed image, and the squares and the blocks and the numbers represent all of the 40-acre lots that the people were given when they fought the Revolutionary War, and how they divided the town of Templeton and surrounding areas. So these are the actual lots, and there is a reference that you can find in the Historical Society that will tell you who had lot number 28 and who had lot number 29. It's very difficult to associate it with a known map because it wasn't really set up that way, but it was done by V.P. Parkhurst, which is the man that did the Civil War memorial plaques that we just saved at the Grange Hall, and he built the GAR Hall, which was where the J.K. Crossroads restaurant. So in the foreground you can see the baseball, it's the T for Templeton, and we don't have any other images that identify this one, but similar ones show that it was about 1936, and it was the Templeton baseball team. Okay, so now we came upstairs from the bottom section, and it continues with the plot plan of the Templeton land grants. And in the foreground here you can see the building, which is on the end of South Road, and that building was originally built by Artemus Lee back about 1811, and he ran a store. So further down was his store, and up here was his private residence. And several people have lived there since. After Artemus Lee, it was Percival Blodgett, and he was the caretaker and the manager of the Templeton Inn when it was originally started up in 1901. And his daughter, Grace Blodgett, was the receptionist. So if you went in and registered to be a guest at the Templeton Inn, you'd be most likely talking to Grace Blodgett. And we've got pictures of her in the museum that date back to when she was a child, all the way till she was a school teacher and a principal at the Templeton High School. So this was their house, but it's a really nice building, and I'm glad that the people that own it today are still maintaining it and adding on to it. And below is the Sibley steam fire engine that Baldwinville purchased. I'm pretty sure it was about 1900, 1901. And they had this one set up. There was an old fire engine house that was made of wood, and that was taken down and now the brick building is in its place. From what I've heard, that this fire apparatus is somewhere in a museum up in Maine. So it still exists, and it would be a wonderful thing for us to get it back, but we just don't have the space at this time. So now we're on the second floor, center of the building, and this collection of pictures covers the Templeton Street Railway, which went throughout all of Templeton, Winchendon, Athol, Gardner, Westminster. So people would come and go, and these cars would go from one spot to another. You'd stop, get off, get onto another train, and then head to the direction you wanted. And this one, the benches, the back would lean forward and back. So if they're going in that direction, they just throw the back this way and you'd sit here looking that way. And that way nobody was driving backwards. And we just recently found that out. This was one of my favorite pictures that I found in the collection of negatives that was taken by Orrin Williams back in the early 1900s. So this is the center of it, and behind them is the East Templeton Church right on the common, which still exists, although today it's no longer a church. The map in the background is one of our maps from 1831, and it gives a really good detail. And the thing I like about these maps is it always showed who lived where. So you'd know if a Norcross was living on there, or a Searle, or a Kiley. There were all the different names, and it was really easy to help people identify who either built their house or who lived in their house back in the 1830s. And then scanning down this way, you'll be able to see the Narragansett Historical Society building, which is on One Boynton Road. And that was the last house, private home of Albert Phelps. And originally built by John and Mary Stiles. They came from London, and those bricks actually came with them on the ship as ballasts. So they would bring the bricks over, and then they'd load it up with wood and bring it back, logs and different woods that America had. So they built that house in 1811, and it is now the home of the Historical Society. And then down at the bottom is a school picture with the teacher up front and the kids. I didn't have a date on that picture, but it shows you how the schools were run back in those days. So that makes it interesting. And they also featured a couple of the businesses that were in town, which was nice to see, so you can check out who was running a business and what they did in this town.
Some people might question why murals like these would be placed in an elementary school out of all schools that they could be placed in. How do you think these murals are perceived by the students, and what do you think it means to them?
Through the years, we've had some of the students, mostly the third grade, do a field trip and come to the museum. And it amazed me at how interested they were and how much they absorbed out of our trips and our teaching them what happened back in the day. So they were genuinely interested. And I hope that carries over here into the school. Although I know that when they're here, they're rushing from class to class and they have to be there at a certain time. So they may just not notice it out of the corner of their eye, but every now and then I'm hoping that they stop and look and really ask questions. And they can always get the answers from us at the Historical Society. One of my favorite things about those class trips was that every one of those students remembers, even 10, 20, 30 years later, that they came here when they were in third grade and they came back with their parents the following weekend to show them what they learned. I've got parents that are showing up now saying that, yeah, I was on that class trip in grade 3 and I remember this, and I remember that. So it sticks with them, and it is important to know what happened 100 years ago, and you kind of get an idea of what might happen 100 years from now. So these pictures are there. I'm glad that the architects used them so that the kids can actually open their minds and create new questions and ask anytime. You're more than welcome. We're always happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you for having me.